The 5th, 26th of October 1988 saw the broadcast of Remembrance of the Daleks, kicking off Doctor Who's 25th anniversary season with a bang. Part 2 saw the highest viewing figures for the story with 5.8 million viewers, whilst Part 4 saw the story's lowest figures with 5 million. By 1987, Ben Aaronovitch had spent almost half a decade trying to break into television scriptwriting. In May, he submitted an idea called Nightfall to script editor Andrew Cartmel. Cartmel didn't think Nightfall itself was appropriate for the programme, but met with Aaronovitch and encouraged him to try again. In June, Aaronovitch worked on a proposal entitled Transit, and by the end of the summer he was making better headway with Storm over Avelion, inspired by the legends of King Arthur. Around the same time, in late August, the BBC confirmed to producer John Nathan Turner that Doctor Who would continue into its 25th season. Sensitive to the expectations of such a milestone year, JNT wanted to start the season off with a major attraction, and soon settled on bringing back the Daleks, who had last been seen in Season 22's Revelation of the Daleks. On October 9th, the production office began formally securing permission to use the Daleks from their creator, Terry Nation. Although Storm over Avelion had not yet been formally commissioned, the production team had seen enough of it to observe that Aaronovitch had a flair for the kind of fast-paced action story they wanted for the new Daleks serial. As such, Aaronovitch was asked to cease work on the Arthurian tale and instead begin devising the Season 25 premiere. Storm over Avelion would later be resurrected as Battlefield in 1989. In addition to pitting the Doctor against his oldest enemies, JNT and Andrew Cartmel wanted this adventure to begin addressing a concern they shared that Doctor Who had lost some of its wonder, and that the Doctor himself was no longer a very mysterious figure. Cartmel in particular wanted to start laying hints that there was more to the Doctor's background than they had revealed before. This was greeted enthusiastically by star Sylvester McCoy, who himself had finally had time to think more thoroughly about his portrayal of the Doctor, after being cast almost at the last minute prior to the start of production on Season 24 the previous year, and wanted to invest the character with a great sense of darkness and moodiness. On October 30th, Aaronovitch was commissioned to write the first episode of his Dalek adventure under the title Nemesis of the Doctor. At this point, it was planned to be the third story into production for Season 25, and was designated Serial 7K. Aaronovitch decided to tie his story directly to the very first Doctor Who serial, An Unearthly Child, by revealing just what the Doctor was doing in 1963 London. Subsequently, however, it was pointed out that the Season 22 story Attack of the Cybermen had also revisited the setting of An Unearthly Child, albeit in 1985, prompting Aaronovitch to scale back some of his references. Aaronovitch also drew on the idea put forward in Revelation of the Daleks that there had been a schism in the Dalek ranks. Consequently, he included two Dalek factions, the Red Daleks, led by the Emperor Dalek, and the Blue Daleks, led by the Black Dalek. Observing that Terry Nation had always intended that the Daleks to be a metaphor for the Nazis, Aaronovitch drew upon the burgeoning racist and fascist sentiment in early 60s England. He was keen that his story would not present an overly romanticised depiction of the period. He also considered making use of other elements of Dalek continuity, including the peaceful Files who shared the Daleks' homeworld of Skaro, and the Daleks' brutish servants the Ogrons, but eventually rejected these for fear of overcomplicating the story. Finally, Cartmel encouraged Aaronovitch to make substantial use of Ace, as part of a broader plan to give the character more exposure than many past companions. Sophie Aldred's option for Season 25 was officially taken up on December 1st, although she and John Nathan Turner had agreed to her continued association with Doctor Who while making her debut story Dragonfire in August. McCoy's contract had already been renewed back on November the 19th. The last 3 episodes of Nemesis of the Doctor were commissioned on December the 18th. The Time Lord device was briefly called the Hand of Rassilon, before swapping ancient Gallifreyan pioneers and becoming the Hand of Omega. The head of the association was Mr. Gummer, while Rachel's surname was Israel instead of Jensen. The Special Weapons Dalek was part of the Black Daleks' renegade forces, whereas the Imperial Daleks made use of a floating assault platform. In Part 4, the Black Dalek had nuclear charges attached to the Hand as a safeguard against an attack by the Emperor's forces, only for the Doctor to commune with the Hand and induce it to disarm the explosives. In the story's closing moments, the Doctor killed the Black Dalek with a handheld weapon generated by the Hand, referred to as a Nova Gun, or the Finger of Omega, in a scene intended as a parody of the quick draw tradition in Hollywood westerns. One notion which had evolved out of the regular discussions between Cartmel and his team of prospective writers for Season 25 was the idea that Doctor Who is set in a universe where some of our fictional characters are actually real, much like the Doctor himself. To this end, Aaronovitch included references to Professor Bernard Quatermass and his British rocket group, created by Nigel Neal for the BBC science fiction serial The Quatermass Experiment in 1953 and revived in 2 sequels. Near the end of the story, he also intended to allude to the replacement of Gilmore's countermeasure unit with the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, led by Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. The same concept inspired by the episode 2 scene in which a BBC continuity announcer refers to the imminent broadcast of an episode of a new science fiction series, the intent being that this would be the Doctor Who universe parallel of Doctor Who itself. As Iranovich completed work on the first draft, he happened to speak with visual effects assistant Mike Tucker. A Doctor Who fan, Tucker mentioned that he had always wanted to build a domed Emperor Dalek prop, akin to the version depicted in the Dalek comic strip published in the pages of TV Century 21 in the mid-1960s, which would split open to reveal the Daleks' creator Davros inside. Iranovich had been sceptical of using Davros, whom he felt tended to overshadow the Daleks and reduce them to mere henchmen, but now seized upon Tucker's idea for the serial's ending. Unfortunately, after receiving Iranovich's draft scripts in January 1988, Terry Nation responded to object to Nemesis of the Doctor and the minimal role played by Davros in particular. Happily, J&T was able to reassure Nation's concerns, and his agents gave the project their formal approval on February 16th. By now it had been decided that the Dalek story would be first in the production queue for season 25, designated Serial 7H, and directed by Andrew Morgan, who had also made Time and the Rani the previous year. Iranovich continued to work on his scripts, especially in light of concerns that they were substantially overlong. One notable deletion was a lengthy battle sequence in Part 3 as the Doctor and Ace travel from the Builder's Yard to Coal Hill School. The final confrontation with the Black Dalek was also reworked to have the Doctor talk it into destroying itself, as both McCoy and Andrew Morgan felt that the Doctor's use of a gun was out of character. At this stage, Gummer became Ratcliffe to avoid confusion with the name Gilmore, and the serial gained the new title, Remembrance of the Daleks. A major task facing visual effects designer Stuart Brisden was the accumulation of sufficient Dalek props for Serial 7H. In addition to the brand new Emperor Dalek and Special Weapons Dalek casings, there was also the need for enough Daleks to make up both the Imperial and the Renegade factions. It was decided that the Black Daleks' forces would consist of 6 previously built props, most of them emanating from Revelation of the Daleks, while the Emperor's troops were 4 new constructions. It had now been decided that the Daleks' colour scheme should reflect the liveries seen in Revelation of the Daleks. As such, the Imperial Daleks would be cream with gold trim instead of red with black trim, while the Renegade Daleks would be grey with black trim instead of blue with silver trim. The first day of filming for season 25 was April 4th. Ratcliffe's Yard was a property on Feed Street in London, while the episode 4 battle between the Dalek factions was filmed under a rail bridge at Windmill Walk. The explosions detonated by the visual effects team drew the attention of the police, who arrived to investigate the possibility of an attack by the Irish Republican Army on the nearby Waterloo East Station. Morgan's team returned to both locations, completing the work at Feed Street on the 5th, where more pyrotechnics were strong enough to set off car alarms and damage several of the Dalek casings, and at Windmill Walk on the 6th. The rest of April 6 and the entirety of the 7th was spent at the Kew-Bridge Steam Museum in Brentford, Middlesex, for scenes in and around Totter's Lane. Originally it had been hoped that the London scrapyard might be used as an Attack of the Cybermen, but there were concerns about the proximity of private residences, given that more large explosions were planned. This story marked the first appearance of the stunt coordinator Tip Tipping, who was the soldier that was first shot by the Imperial Dalek in episode 1. This stunt was achieved by wiring Tip into a harness and winch, and he would fling himself backwards on cue. A continuity error did occur at the museum when a sign painter printed the name on the scrapyard as LM Foreman instead of IM Foreman. Although the leading L was easily changed to an I, the missing E could not be corrected in time for recording. April the 8th was a busy day, with Morgan's team working in several different London venues. In addition to several street scenes, the graveyard, Willesden Lane Cemetery, while establishing shots were taken for the Army HQ at TA Hall and the funeral parlour at John Node's funeral services. Finally, from April 9th to the 13th, omitting only the 10th, various sequences in and around Coal Hill School were filmed at St John's School, which was between terms and on the adjacent Macbeth Street. For the scene where Ace wields her souped-up baseball bat, Aldred inadvertently damaged a real Dalek casing in the mistaken belief that it was a dummy prop. The Imperial Dalek shuttlecraft landing was lowered in by a crane, and McCoy suggested that the Doctor lasso his way to the spaceship and slide down the rope. Whilst McCoy was keen to perform the stunt himself, Tip Tipping ultimately performed the stunt. On the 12th, McCoy ad-libbed dialogue giving Gilmore's name as Chunky. This stemmed from an incident at the Steam Museum when actor Simon Williams misinterpreted the script's description of his character's chunky service revolver as referring to a specific type of gun. Amongst the extras posing as Coal Hill students this day were the children of Williams, Morgan and costume designer Ken True, plus the sister of Jasmine Breaks, who was playing the little girl who turned out to be integrated with the Dalek battle computer. With so many scenes recorded on location, Remembrance of the Daleks was allocated just a single 3-day studio block beginning on Wednesday, April the 27th in BBC Television Centre Studio 8. Terry Molloy was already booked to make his on-screen return as Davros, and it was hoped that he could also voice the Dalek battle computer to further the pretense that it was Davros and not the little girl who was working with the renegade Daleks. However, when other commitments prevented Molloy from attending the recording session, John Leeson, formerly the voice of the Doctor's robot dog K9, agreed to provide a Davros-like performance in his stead. On the first day in TC8, sets in use included the cafe, the Army HQ, and the Coal Hill School entrance hall. Originally, the Doctor was going to shoot the Dalek with the bazooka, but felt it was too out of character and suggested Ace did it, and Sophie Aldred had to receive weapons training at the BBC Armoury. More material on the latter was recorded on April the 18th, as well as Mike's living room, the bridge of the Dalek shuttle, and the school stairwell and cellar. Remaining cellar scenes were then completed on the 19th. This story was the first to show a Dalek flying on screen, and was achieved with 2 scaffolding poles and the Dalek prop sitting on a tray. The prop was very heavy and needed many crew members to winch it upstairs. Scenes in the warehouse office, the funeral parlour, and the Imperial Dalek mothership were also completed on this day, in which Molloy made his final on-screen appearance as Davros. He also reprised the role of Davros for several Doctor Who audio plays produced by Big Finish Productions, beginning with the appropriately named Davros in September 2003. In spite of the effort to trim Aranovic's scripts, the initial edits of all 4 episodes substantially overran their 25-minute time slots. A notable casualty of this excessive length was Davros accusing the Doctor of being merely another Time Lord, to which the Doctor responds that he is far more than just another Time Lord. Had it aired, this would have been the first explicit statement of the new direction in which Cartmel wanted to take the character. He and Aranovich had roughed out ideas about the Doctor being somehow linked to a shadowy figure from Gallifreyan legend called the Other, who was one of the 3 pillars of ancient Time Lord society alongside Rassilon and Omega. The story's opening montage was originally intended to be longer, but permission was denied for the inclusion of some of the planned clips, most notably Queen Elizabeth heralding the construction of the Trans-Pacific Cable on December 2nd, 1963. On the other hand, Bob Dylan turned out to be such a fan of Doctor Who that he allowed an expert from his protest song Only a Pawn in Their Game to be used for free. To preserve the surprise of Davros's appearance on Part 3, the Emperor Dalek was credited to Roy Tremoley, an anagram of Terry Molloy. When work was completed, the footage was shown to head of drama Mark Shivers by Andrew Cartmel. Shivers had to take a phone call during the scene where Ace finds the No Coloured sign in the window. When Shivas returned to the viewing, Cartmel rewound the tape, which was against BBC guidelines, and Shivas even suggested that Ace tears up the sign. To this day, Cartmel feels this was a missed opportunity. McCoy even objected to this scene being cut in the rehearsal room, as he said this scene was the essence of the whole story. Unfortunately, the ambitious scope of Remembrance of the Daleks proved to be more than the Doctor Who budget could bear, incurring an overspend of more than £12,000. As a result, BBC policy precluded Morgan from returning to the programme. However, his subsequent television credits included episodes of Casualty, The Worst Witch and Heartbeat. Williams, Pamela Salem and Karen Gledhill returned to the characters of Gilmore, Rachel and Alison respectively in a series of audio plays from Big Finish Productions entitled Countermeasures, first released in July 2012. For Season 25, Doctor Who was shifted to a Wednesday night slot from the Monday time slot allocated to Season 24. However, cast and crew were disappointed to learn that it was still scheduled opposite the ITV soap opera Coronation Street. While the strategy had originally been described as a counter-programming move by the BBC, the low viewing figures for Season 24 suggested that younger viewers were being prevented from watching Doctor Who by their parents, given that many households still had only a single television. It was originally thought that the season would begin airing on September the 7th, but coverage of the Summer Olympics game in Seoul, South Korea, prompted a revision of these plans, with episode 1 of Remembrance of the Daleks finally heralding the start of the Silver Anniversary season on October the 5th. It also marked a milestone of a different sort of Doctor Who, as the first episode to be broadcast with stereo sound, and indeed one of the first such programmes in Britain. The 7th Doctor and Ace arrive in Shoreditch in 1963. They meet a military unit led by Group Captain Gilmore and Sergeant Smith, tracking abnormal local magnetic fluctuations originating mainly from Coal Hill School, where a transmat device is in its basement and is tied to a Dalek ship in geostationary orbit. A second, weaker fluctuation is emitted by a grey Dalek in a nearby junkyard. Evidently, 2 Dalek factions are present, the Imperial Daleks on the orbiting mothership controlling the school, and renegade Daleks who reject the Emperor's authority. Both sides seek the hand of Omega, a Time Lord device the Doctor left on Earth during his first visit in 1963. Mike Smith is a secret associate of Ratcliffe, the leader of a group of fascists reporting to a renegade battle computer, which also uses a schoolgirl as its eyes and ears. The Doctor has the hand buried in a local cemetery as a ruse, but it is soon unearthed by Ratcliffe, tipped off by Smith. Imperial Daleks arrive to seize it from the renegades, but the Doctor and Ace defeat them and destroy their transmat. Anticipating a siege, the Doctor has Gilmore fortify the school while he tries to retrieve the hand. He fails but disables the renegade time controller, fleeing with Daleks in pursuit, returning just as the Imperial Daleks land. They rout the renegades, wiping out all but the Supreme Dalek, allowing Ratcliffe and Smith to escape with the controller, pursued by the schoolgirl who kills Ratcliffe. The Imperial Daleks take the hand to the mothership, leaving for their home planet, Skaro. After a season of the production team trying to find their feet, Remembrance of the Daleks is a pure example of kicking off Andrew Cartmell's true vision for Doctor Who with a bang. Remembrance gives us brilliant references to the past, while also thinking ahead to the future, and how the Doctor and the series itself is looking ahead and being far more than what it has just become at this point. But despite its continuity references, I always point to this story as one that new series fans should start with when getting into the classic series. Season 25 for me is the debut of the real McCoy, and I don't think we've had a bigger character makeover for a Doctor between seasons in the entire history of the programme. The seeds of the Doctor being a master manipulator are being planted here, and no longer is the 7th Doctor an inferior Troughton copy, but a force to be reckoned with in the universe. It's a massive breath of fresh air for the Doctor to be more proactive and to make sure that things go to his plan. Aranovich and Cartmell made a conscious effort within this story to have the Doctor drive the events all the way through. Cartmell thought that the Doctor in recent years had become a victim of events and had to be more of a commanding figure. I adore the way the Doctor just dives into the van and begins a conversation with Rachel.
Yeah?
Who are you?
I'm the Doctor.
I'm Rachel. Professor Rachel Jensen.
How do you do? I'm sure I've heard of you.
This is a man who thinks he has every right to interfere and has no apologies for it. And the way he spits out humans while clashing with Group Captain Gilmore is great. Never has the Doctor felt more alien in the series than he has now. However, this proactive role is even questioned by the Doctor himself when he speaks with John, the cafe owner.
See? Every great decision creates ripples. Like a huge boulder dropped in a lake. The ripples merge, rebound off the banks in unforeseeable ways. The heavier the decision, the larger the waves, the more uncertain the consequences.
Life's like that. Best thing is just to get on with it.
I absolutely adore this scene, as it adds a brand new dimension to the Doctor to what he does later in the story. Does the Doctor really have the right to play God and manipulate the universe and other people's lives, like we see him do to Ace in later stories, for the greater good? This is a Doctor who does care for the consequences of his actions, because even the military are pawns in his own game, and he even treats them like chess pieces. They are to be strategically moved on the board to ensure that his plan works. However, there is still that compassion that the character still has, as he doesn't want them to get killed in the crossfire when they don't stand a chance fighting the Daleks. His confrontation with Davros is perfect, and one of the highlights of the 7th Doctor era. The way he constantly belittles and angers Davros is perfect. He knows full well that the angrier he gets, the closer Davros and the Daleks are to destroying themselves.
Oh, wonderful! What power, what brilliance! You can wipe out the odd civilization, enslave the occasional culture, but you still won't detract from the basic fundamental truth of your own impotence!
Careful, Doctor.
That's the cycle of fascism for you. Eventually their hatred will become so powerful that they will become blind to their own actions and cause their own downfall, as Skaro is destroyed at the end of this story. The 7th Doctor achieves in this story what the 4th Doctor failed to do in Genesis of the Daleks. The Doctor is done with talking and wondering whether he has the right. He is now all action, and he commits genocide against the Daleks. This is the Time Lord victorious before that idea was even a teardrop in Russell T Davies's or Big Finish's eyes. Now, if the Doctor can be quiet and subtle in this story, Ace is the complete contrast. She starts the story blasting out music, blasting out explosions, and of course beating up a Dalek with a baseball bat.
Small human female sighted on level 3.
What are you calling small?
Under attack. Under attack.
However, putting that awesome scene aside, and trust me, it is awesome, this is still a great story for Ace, as her first travel in the TARDIS. Already she gets culture shock with 60s currency, and the 60s attitude to diversity. This scene is so vital because it manages to discreetly unearth the story's theme and shows Ace's anger without any dialogue, and it's fantastic. When she finds out that Mike has betrayed her, it's really well done, and here she finds that even humanity can be monsters as well, and not just tin pot machines. But there is plenty of compassion from Ace, as in one of my favourite scenes from her, she comforts the young girl who has come to her senses after breaking free from Dalek conditioning. Plus, at the end, when they attend Mike's funeral, she even asks were they even right to interfere in the first place. This is a departure from the companions who scream at Daleks and just ask questions. Their relationship feels very real in this story, and given that the Doctor and Ace had only met in the previous story Dragonfire, it's a testament to how brilliant these two actors are, and the chemistry is completely on screen at this point. The 7th Doctor and Ace are one of my favourite Doctor-companion pairings, and they're brilliant. The supporting cast are all really memorable in this story, particularly the military group. Now, yeah, they are more or less our unit stand-ins for this story, but I can forgive that because at this point in the Doctor Who universe, unit didn't exist yet. But luckily enough, they are distinct in this serial to make them a very worthy addition to the story. Heck, they would even get their own spin-off series in Big Finish. You've got Group Captain Gilmore, played by Simon Williams, who wants to go in all guns blazing and doesn't want to listen to the Doctor, and thinks he can just blast the Daleks out of the sky. However, he isn't a stupid brute either, and by the end he is willing to trust the Doctor to dispose of the Supreme Dalek. Rachel and Alison are also really good. He encourages them both to think outside the box when coming to their own conclusions about what's in the junkyard. They instantly trust the Doctor and even pass this on to Captain Gilmore.
Steady on! Steady on! You dragged me down from Cambridge, you quote the Peacetime Emergency Powers Act at me, and then you expect me to advise on something outside the realm of human experience. Bluntly, Group Captain, we're reliant on the Doctor because only the Doctor knows what is going on.
All the characters serve their purpose very well in this, and they never feel like they are taking up too much screen time, or they feel irrelevant to this. I even like the cameos we get from actors like Michael Sherd and Peter Halliday, who had popped up occasionally in Classic Who as different characters, so it's great that for Doctor Who's 25th anniversary we do get some returning actors. It's a really nice nod to the past. The Daleks in this story are on top form once again. Since Davros appeared in Genesis of the Daleks, they have for the most part resorted to being his henchmen and nameless grunts, simply fetching and carrying and obeying orders. But here they are back with a bang and leading the action in full force. Right from the start we are shown how tough just one Dalek is, as it takes on an entire military force that blasts guns and rockets to it, and it's still going despite that. Not to mention the reveal of them being able to fly is amazing. The effect still holds up today, and it still gives me chills when the Dalek keeps shouting exterminate, and it's an amazing cliffhanger. But even so, their own philosophies are, depressingly, pretty close to home. Now, it's no secret that the Daleks are based on the Nazi political party, and in 1963 there were problems in the UK with far-right extremism, and cities like London trying to absorb West Indian and Asian immigrants, and many white supremacists taking problems with that and wanting to keep Britain white. Mike and Mr. Ratcliffe represent these problems with diversity and race, and Mr. Ratcliffe lays out his motivations here.
Are you ready for war, Mr. Ratcliffe?
Yes. This country fought for the wrong cause in the last war. When I spoke out, they had me imprisoned.
You will be on the right side in this war.
Now, it may be hard to believe now, but there were people during the Second World War who thought that Britain should have sided with the Nazis. Mike even represents the racial philosophy of the Daleks.
I never really wanted to hurt anybody. It's just you have to protect your own. Keep the outsiders out, just so that your own people can have a fair chance.
I said shut up!
Yeah, his reasoning sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it?
History will show that cooperation between different species is impossible. One race must survive all others, and to do this it must dominate.
This perfectly showcases the destructive nature of fascism. They are committed to supremacy, but are disposed of by the Daleks when they are no longer useful to them. They are just slaves. It's amazing that the Daleks' fascist ideologies are resurrected again for this story, and is given a revelation in ourselves that is worth remembering. Any slight difference in Dalek purity and they fight each other, which is made clear when, given the chance to examine the Dalek mutants, the Imperials and Renegades hate each other, mainly because, well, their mutations are very different from each other, and on both sides neither of them are pure. This could easily have been a command structure problem, but I love how Aranovich added this extra subtext to the Daleks. The Daleks have never looked as good in this story, with their Imperial and Renegade colour schemes looking terrific. However, they unfortunately do tend to wobble on location a bit, which is quite a shame. They have a great impact on all the characters in this story as well. The Doctor, of course, sees them as his mortal enemy, Ace sees them as aggressive aliens and forces that we have to fight, Rachel and Alison are thrilled at the prospect of getting to study alien life forms, while Gilmore sees them as an enemy that needs to be destroyed utterly, and Ratcliffe sees them as racist sympathisers who will be the muscle and his army for his own white supremacy group, the Association. I love the Dalek variants we get as well, like the Special Weapons Dalek that easily puts the rest of his Imperial Dalek colleagues to shame. The computer is a really great idea as well. Using a young girl is so cruel in the way they use imagination and intellect for their own needs, and John Leeson's voice for the computer is really creepy, and it's just such a terrifying image that there's a young innocent girl trapped in there who's become a slave to fascism and disgusting ideologies. Jasmine Breaks is really good as well, the way she stares menacingly at people, and the skipping is really creepy as well. The Supreme Daleks ending is really good too. It has no purpose left and no home planet, so it destroys itself for good while the Doctor talks it to death. Now, with the Daleks taking the spotlight for this story, it is inevitable that Davros is given less screen time, and yeah, he is more or less back to his ranting and shouty mode, and I do think it's a step down from the brilliant characterisation we got in Revelation of the Daleks, but it works in the context of this story, as the Doctor mentions that Davros has already cast off the last remains of his humanity, so I can forgive this. Nevertheless, Malloy is still excellent as Davros, and I do like how this story leaves his fate open for return. In fact, if you want to listen to a story that explores Davros losing his organic roots, you should listen to the audio Terra Firma by Joseph Lidster from Big Finish. It's a terrific Davros story and I highly recommend it. Production-wise, this story is top-notch and even feels like a movie a lot of times. The POV shots of the Dalek are fantastic, the shuttlecraft landing in the playground looks amazing, and shows that model work will always top CGI and video effects. There's fantastic explosions and action sequences between humans and Daleks, and the two Dalek faction battle sequences are all brilliant. Despite only taking place over the course of a day or two and just a few streets in Shoreditch, the scale of the story is never lost at all. The cliffhangers are all fantastic and don't just feel like a break in the 25-minute time frame, and the Daleks, like I said before, have never looked better. The music by Keith McCulloch might be the weakest part of this story for me, as I've never really been a fan of his style of music, as often I find it a bit too intrusive and almost quite whimsical at points. However, to his credit, I do like his music for the action sequences, as they are appropriately scored and match what is going on the screen. It's a shame Andrew Morgan wasn't even asked back for the new series like Graham Harper was, because he has such a brilliant talent for shooting action and giving the whole story such an epic feel. The serial is absolutely celebrating the programme's past, but also forging and looking ahead for its long-time future, that would sadly be cut short the following year. To conclude, Remembrance of the Daleks not only stands as one of the greatest Dalek stories ever written, but a highlight of the 7th Doctor and 80s Doctor Who as a whole. Considering this was one of Aranovich's first scripts, it is terrific. There's a lot going on, but the pacing never feels rushed. The themes and characters are balanced perfectly with terrific action sequences, and continuity references are plenty. The Doctor and Ace are given a lot to do in this serial, and the Daleks are just on top form. Both the Doctor and the Daleks are given an excellent study that goes back to their roots, but paves the way for brilliant new ideas to be done with them. The story moves at an energetic pace that never loses focus, and the production values throughout are excellent. I would highly recommend this serial to any new series fan who wants to get into the classic series, as it's a perfect stepping on point. Remembrance of the Daleks goes back to the genesis of the series to show what its destiny can be, and gives it a resurrection for a revelation that is worth remembering. It is one of the series' finest.
Yes. Doctor?
Yes?
We did good, didn't we?
Perhaps. Time will tell. Always does.